Welcome to Writers Den. I'm Brenda Joyce Patterson. Writers Den is a program that showcases and uncovers all things literary in Polk County and beyond. And today, I'm really excited to say we have two authors that I've been trying to get on the show forever. And those two authors are Fred Koehler, probably said it wrong, I'm sorry, Fred, and right. Sarah McGuire. Thank you, y'all. I've been wanting you to come on this show because you are kidlit authors. And kidlit is its own place, its own world. And we want to talk about this. But first, aren't you two together? Aren't you two kidlit authors married? Tell us a little bit about that. Or together or something. Y'all are together. Taking over the world. I love it.
We like to keep up the intrigue, you know. That's like so if we don't tell everybody that we're married, then it just makes it way more interesting. So we often just call each other boyfriend and girlfriend,
right?
Even though we got the rings, but shh.
Well, that works.
Name tags at the conferences have different names on it because Sarah McGuire is what I publish under. So it's always fun, for people to see the different name tags and then it'll be like, that guy over there, I think he's kind of cute. What are my chances? So it's
oh, dang.
Yeah, keep a little spice in the relationship,
I like that though. I like that. I don't share a name with my husband. And sometimes he gets called by my name, but he's really cool about it. He's like, yes, I belong to her. and keep moving. So yeah.
Well, we actually met through the writing industry. So we had both won a scholarship to a novel writing conference in Oregon. And I had won the second place scholarship at this writing conference. And I showed up and was introducing myself around to people and saying, hey, I'm Fred, I'm the scholarship winner, second place scholarship winner, and up walks this girl and she says, and my name's Sarah and I'm the first place winner. And
I love it. Girl power.
Yes. And he was the guy who would sit at the back of the room, kind of like the cool kids. And I was the Hermione-like character sitting up front. And I sat at the back the last couple of sessions. So, yeah.
By the end, I convinced her to join the bad kids.
Oh, I should have known. You got that look. You got the sparkle in your eyes. Like, let's get into trouble. I like it.
Good trouble. Always good trouble.
Yes.
That is very true. Good trouble. That's really good. So you met at a conference. See, that's something, well, you got the scholarships to that workshop thing. And now this is something that I'm going to show my ignorance with. So within children's literature or kidlit, which covers everything from picture books all the way to teen novels, right?
Yes,
correct.
Through young adults.
How much do you all actually sort of overlap? I mean, do the conferences all like encompass everybody, or do sometimes they have it where there's just children's lit, like picture books and what have you? How does that work?
So probably the best place to kind of learn, or any conference kidlit, is going to be through the SCBWI. So it's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Hands down, fabulous conferences. They fly in industry professionals. So you're concentrating on craft, but also business. And typically those are picture books through YA, and they'll have breakout sessions for people within the different disciplines.
And even breakout sessions for illustrators. So if all you are is an artist, you can still go to one of those conferences and get something from it. So there's that kind of conference. The conference where we met was just novel writing. So it was specific to novels, and it wasn't just for kid novels. It was for novel writers of all ages.
And genres.
Right. So, I've been to that kind of conference or what have you. where it's just strictly novels or novels and nonfiction and what have you, because I write nonfiction too, as well as poetry. So yeah, interesting. Because sometimes I guess I'm a librarian, so obviously we have children's departments that have all of the different books, but sometimes it feels like never the two shall meet, because of course picture books and those first readers are obviously a world away from, say, the middle grade books, the YA books, and what have you. So I was thinking, how did that work? How did you all overlap? But you did say about the novel thing. So this is a good thing. This is a good thing, which of course lets us know that novel writing is the same. It's the same. It's the same, whether it's for kids or teens or adults, the same elements come into play.
Absolutely.
And the advice that I often give is, if there is a writers conference of any sort that you can get yourself to, you're gonna learn something.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sat in sessions for sci-fi, and I would take the stuff I learned from a sci-fi novel writing conference and apply that to the picture book that I was illustrating. So like there's always something to learn, and it's really just about, hearing from interesting people who have gone before you and accomplished a lot, and adding to your writer's toolkit.
Yes, I agree on my little small end over here. Yes. Because the cool thing is, I like to call it cross-pollination.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, Fred, that you use pieces of that sci-fi session to work with your picture books. And as you saw that lovely reaction on my face, what? A little surprised. But I guess I shouldn't be, because that makes sense. Creativity, especially in the fact that you're all in writing, that it should sort of help water your patch of the ground as well as the other patch. That makes sense. So how in the world did you all get into doing this writing for kids? And I'm gonna elbow Fred out of the way.
So I had loved writing, but never thought much of it. And oh my goodness, like 2000, ended up writing a story for one of my younger sisters. It was a retelling of Cinderella, and she loved it. It was like a Christmas present. And then I remember thinking how much I enjoyed doing that. I wondered if I could write something that would be worth publishing. And then you sort of start running through the different channels of figuring out, are there classes I can take? Are there groups I can go with? And I'd heard about SCBWI, and I think I attended a conference of theirs maybe 2003. And it was probably 2007 though, where I decided, all right, I'm going to play with this. I'm going to see if I can actually write something that's published. And to me, there's a big difference between writing for yourself and writing to be published, because the thought of the audience switches. When you're writing for yourself, you're either writing for a catharsis, or you're just writing to think, or you're writing to please yourself. And when you start thinking about being published, you're thinking of an audience, and you revise differently when you're thinking of writing for an audience. Not to say that you're being untrue to yourself, but I think there becomes a point in time where you want to make sure that the story is told in a way that people can enter it. I think of it as hospitality. You're making this story ready for people to come into it. So, and it took me, 6 years of working to get to where I had a novel that got me an agent. I'd say another really good resource for kid lit writers is the Highlights. They do fabulous workshops, and I will be honest, I was never a fan of the Highlights magazine. And I think part of that was because I associated it with these like half filled out magazines in the doctor's waiting room. So like as a like where like half of the pictures were circled and the findings. So that was what I thought of when I thought of highlights. And somebody told me to see if I could go to a highlights workshop. And it was at that workshop, it was a whole novel workshop with Patty Gouch, who was the editor of the Redwall series for most of the Redwall series. She did a book on fantasy novels, and it was a novel that I began there that was my debut novel. So how you get into it, you work at it, and you work way harder and way longer than you ever thought that you would have to. You find your tribe. And I think it's the working harder and longer that helps you decide if that's something you actually want to do, which is not a bad thing. There are things that are wonderful for a hobby, and sometimes you keep it at that level. But for me, it was finding my tribe, and it was just putting in the time to get better and better and better. And Fred can probably talk about like the role that professional critiques play in that, because that played a huge role in.
It did.
One thing before you start. So your first novel was Valiant?
It was Valiant, yes. Okay. So that was sold in 2013. Oops.
Nice.
And released in 2015. So yeah, and this I think released like a couple months after I met Fred. So yes. But it's a retelling of The Brave Little Tailor, except this time the tailor is a girl and she's dealing with an army of giants instead of just 2 or 3. So
nice.
I like it.
Yeah. Mr. Fred.
Yes. What was I supposed to talk about?
How you
Talk about how you got into it, how you got started.
Goodness. I guess I kind of always saw myself working in some form of publishing. I got my first gig as an intern at the Highlands Today newspaper down in Sebring when I was 16 years old. And I mean, from the very first time I saw my name on a byline, and I think it was for taking a photo of like the pet of the week at the SPCA, but I was like, oh, I'm hooked. Yeah. So, I always worked for a newspaper, or for in college, it was the yearbook and the school newspaper. So writing journalistic stories, that sort of thing, learning graphic design through college. And I think after college, I worked primarily as a designer. So as a graphic designer, because I always thought that the sort of professional artists, the starving artists, I thought if you really wanted to pursue art, and I consider writing part of that world, that your choices were very limited, and you would probably be in some little studio apartment in New York City hovering over a candle because you couldn't afford the heat and eating ramen noodles. And I wasn't necessarily ready for that at that point in my life. So, I got a regular job, and I worked in public relations and advertising and marketing. Did a couple of years for public supermarkets and their creative services department. But it was really when my son Jack was on the way that I thought to myself, I want both my kids. I want my kids to grow up, and I want them to pursue their dreams. I want them to see what's out there in the world and go after it. And if I don't do that myself, what kind of example am I going to set? So funniest thing, I picked up a tablet, a drawing tablet that, translated right into the computer. And all of a sudden, all the stuff that I'd learned, like photoshopping the cans of peas for Publix or making the creamy mashed potatoes look like chunky mashed potatoes, it translated directly into illustration. And all of a sudden I'm starting to draw, and I'm like, oh, like this all kind of makes sense, and it works and it fits. So I started drawing, and then I started to put words with the pictures. And then I spent just as much time as Sarah going to those conferences, having people tell me, nope, you're not quite ready. You're not quite ready. You're not quite ready. So that was 6 or 7 years of doing that. But, I would take my vacation time and my vacation money. And that's what took me to the conferences, because I was serious about it. And because, you know, I created a budget for it. It was like, every year I'm going to give myself $1,000 or $1,100. And that means I can go to this one conference and pay for the hotel room and pay for the registration. And then, you know, a couple of times I went to one of the bigger conferences in New York or California. And, you know, those are a little bit more expensive, but it was that consistent critique. And it was like every single time I would hear, you're getting better, you're getting better, you're getting better. Yes. And then finally one time somebody told me, they're like, you're there, you're at the level, you're ready, you know, and they were right.
Oh man, listening to you both say that in many ways mirrors my own sort of writing journey. Except I took a little bit longer to get serious about it. Life got in the way. I did write a little bit through the years and did a few things, but it wasn't until actually about 5 years ago that I said, okay, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And like you said, you started truly investing in yourself, and you're going to the conferences and you're talking to people. And also, like you said, Sarah, you finding your tribe.
Yes.
Those people who are going to be like, yes, do it. And believe in you even when you don't believe in you.
Yes.
That's really important.
Super.
Yeah. And I like how you said, well, at this point in time, before I go there, at this point in time, you all have day jobs, so to say, day jobs away from your writing, but sort of part of your writing. What are your day jobs? I think I know, but you tell us so I don't fumble.
I'm a middle school and high school math teacher full time. So it keeps me, it keeps me busy. But I am enough of an introvert that I think if I were to only write, I mean,
yes,
the best writing comes from observing and being with people and frankly, just life. And so to write for kids that I teach, and for me, it's easier actually to teach math because when I get to my writing, I haven't used the words up. So yes. I taught creative writing for a while when I lived in Virginia, and I loved it, but we did a lot of workshop style teaching. And so I would get home and my brain would still be in like 20 different stories from my students. And I loved it, but it was really hard to redirect my attention to my story. And so teaching math actually makes it easier to write. So I cannot write at the hours that he writes. I'm not creative when he is creative, but Saturday afternoons are typically my time to get away and get a couple hours in. And then I have a great critique group. We have a great critique group. And there's a lot to be said for knowing that you're going to see some people on Wednesday afternoon that expect to have pages. And, you know, it helps you prioritize it, or it helps me prioritize it at least.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's true. That's true. And Mr. Fred, what's your day job?
Yeah. So I actually survived for about 7 or 8 years as a full-time freelance creative. So I was running my own company, doing the graphic design work, making logos and websites and, you know, all that sort of stuff for folks. And, you know, was processing and like doing all of the publishing work at the same time. So, you know, get a little bit of money coming in from here, a little bit of money coming in from here, and together, you know, it would make rent. Yeah. And then, you know, a couple of years ago, I mean, I just remember like the books had a bad year. The advertising agency had a bad year. And then like my kid needed braces and it was just like, I can't afford that. So, so it was a good opportunity to go back and get one of those day jobs, even though I think it's like, that's like a 4-letter word to me. You know, I like to be loosey-goosey, wild and free. But for the past couple of years, I've been doing all the marketing and advertising work for All Saints Academy, which is a wonderful, wonderful private school here in Polk County, in between Lakeland and Winter Haven. So I do all their marketing and advertising work, help them with their logos and their websites and all that sort of stuff. And it provides for the family, and it still leaves me enough time to be creative.
Fred, you said that you had these jobs that sort of help you develop yourself as an illustrator and as a writer too. And probably when you were saying that, you saw my head go, yes, 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 yes. Because I work at a library, but the job that I do at the library is I'm putting together programs. I'm having to do a little bit of marketing, some publicity. I'm dealing with people, inviting people to come to the library or talk or do presentations, programs, or workshops, or what have you. And all those things have fed into my writing, and also into how I view the writing business. And it sounds like that's definitely true with you, because you spent most of your time, your working time, doing sort of illustration as well as some writing. Let me ask you this. So, Sarah, you say that when you were teaching writing, it took too much of your writing brain. But on the flip side, Fred, you're saying that because you were sort of past your head deep into it, into your drawing and what have you, that made it better. Where's the difference there? Besides that, you all are two different people. Is it because the art is slightly different from the actual words, or am I missing the point completely? Because I'm not a visual person. I'm not an artist that way.
The art and the writing are two opposite sides of the brain for me. So like I can put on my headphones and jam out to any tunes in the whole world while I'm drawing, for example, and just get lost and be absolutely lost in like the process between my eye, my hand, and the paper. But then when I'm writing, the only thing I can listen to is like film music, like violin music or piano music or something like that. That's like, if it has words, those words try and jump into my story, and I can't do it. And if somebody compliments me on my artwork and says, Fred, you did a good job on that, I'm like, yes, I did, because that is my job, because I'm a professional artist. But if somebody comes up to me and says, I love what you wrote, I'm like, oh, you did? Like, it really, really touches my heart. And I can't tell you why that is. I can just tell you that's what it is.
Interesting. I think, whoa. You were going to say something, Sarah?
Oh, and I was going to say, and it wasn't that I loved teaching creative writing when I did it. Although I think I only taught it for one class. So I taught one class of creative writing and was still teaching math classes, but it was definitely dividing the attention. And I think this as a writer too, there comes a point in time when you're just having to focus, and that all your attention is put towards that story, or, well, it's still a story if it's nonfiction, but how you're setting up that narrative. And so when your mind is going to different narratives, whatever they are, even if they're news, it can be distracting. Still worth it. Although one of the things, and Fred hasn't mentioned this, but one of the things that's been interesting for me as somebody who's worked primarily with words, to, have somebody who does both pictures and words, is I think his ability coming from selling and from advertising, his understanding that everything needs to count as a story. And I remember him talking about how in graphic design, essentially an advertisement tells a story in one. That I think has done crazy cool stuff with his writing.
Yeah, my very first book that got published, when I wrote it, I imagined it as a series of billboards in my head. So I thought to myself, I have to have this image, and I'm going to only put 5, 6, or 7 words with that image, and it's got to make you laugh or cry or whatever. It's got to pull this emotion out of you, but that's all I get. And with the attention span of readers today, the picture book, they only want, they say 300 words is too many for a picture book, So really being able to write them that short and simple was super helpful for me getting my foot in the door.
Right. Because you were already primed from all your years before of telling stories in pictures to the point where you didn't even necessarily have to have the words. The words were sort of like an underline for the picture. Am I thinking of that right?
I call it the third thing. So if what I love to do is if the words were to say one thing and the picture shows something different than the words, together they create a third thing. So there's this juxtaposition between them that I find fascinating. And you can only do that in picture books. You can't do that anywhere else. So like if you were to say, I think the opening to one of my stories is Little Jumbo's dad was having a bad day.
Yes.
So there's the words, but the picture wasn't a picture of Little Jumbo's dad. It was a picture of Little Jumbo being crazy. So like that creates that third thing. And you see the smile on your face. Like that's what we're going for. We're going for that unexpected sort of emotional hit.
So in a way, you're telling this story in two tracks. I mean, obviously with the words, but the pictures have so much story embedded in it that you're right. It makes a third thing. And I laugh because I kind of remember that first page, or I should say the first series of pages where he was doing stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? Oh, this kid. Of course his dad's having a bad day. So yeah. What are the books that you've written? You sort of mentioned your first one, Sarah. You said your first one was Valiant. Your second one was...
Oh, my second was Flight of Swans. So I write novels that are retellings of fairy tales. And my favorite are ones where the girls do the saving. So there are fairy tales where you do have very active girls. So this is based off a story that's either in Grimm's or in Hans Christian Andersen about a princess whose brothers are turned into swans and she has to save them. So Flight of Swans. And then these are the only two books that I have out right now. I'm working on another fairy tale retelling, Finis the Falcon, another girl doing the saving, and then working on a contemporary middle grade that has fairy tale elements and involves mysterious 13 floors of hotels that shouldn't exist but do. So that's kind of, but I definitely move with the novels, the thicker novels. I move a little bit slower than this guy who has 10 books, 9 books? Something like that.
We'll go with 8 for right now.
Okay. Okay.
But that's all good. So the novel that I have out right now is called Garbage Island. It's a story of animal characters who are stuck on a floating patch of garbage in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's all the adventures they have and the things that try and eat them and how they survive.
Lots of explosions.
Yes. Yeah. I love adventure stories. And I grew up on the water. So, like my life was full of disasters on the ocean. So I try and put all of that into my stories. Yeah. And then, picture books, I've got a number of them out where I've either been the writer and illustrator or just the illustrator. I was going to show Super Jumbo since we're Lakeland. Super Jumbo, like I rode my bicycle all over the city and took pictures of Lakeland. And I use that as the backdrop for so much in this story. So I think it's just fun for people to be able to see the city of Lakeland as they're reading a story. You can see that. Yeah, there we go. So yeah.
I want to tell you, thank you so much for coming on the show. And you, viewer, if you enjoyed this show today, who knows, there may be a second show with Fred and Sarah. Stay tuned. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching Writers Den.